Hey everyone, welcome to today's video where we're gonna have an update on Intel stock, which I have been following over the past year and a half. I believe there's a lot happening. You can see that there's a lot of rumors out there about TSMC and Broadcom purchasing different parts of Intel, one buying their design and one buying their manufacturing side. Now we can see also that the CEO position, after they fired, in my opinion, the very great and competitive guy Pat Gelsinger, it's still vacant, and there's a lot of rumors out there that maybe Tom Caulfield from Global Foundries is gonna be the new CEO, but still we don't know about that. There's a lot of rumors about Intel 18A comparisons to TSMC N2 process, which we will look into the details. But before we look at Intel's 18A supposed advantage compared to TSMC's the 2 nanometer, I wanted to go back a few years back to 2015. You can see here that back then Intel acquired Recon, eye future of wearables. So they were like looking at watches and all kind of IoT wearables back in 2015-16 timeframe, where they put a lot of their capital in that area. They also purchased a company, I think a German drone company, in addition to another German drone company. I don't remember that name. I think it was MA Vinci, yeah, in 2016 late, but as well the Ascending Technologies in January of that year. So Intel was spending a lot of money on, you could argue, like stuff that was sure cool, but not really like in the core business of Intel. And that was mainly done due to this guy, Frank Dieri, which has been the chairman of the board of directors. I really don't think this guy is a right fit for Intel. He's now out there trying to sell Intel. Quite interestingly, that just after this, in my opinion, very incompetent board of directors fired the one guy that was responsible for whatever 10 or 12%, 15% chance that Intel still has to make a recovery. Very low chance, but you could argue they still are in the game, especially with Intel 18A. That was Pat Gelsinger. They decided to fire him very recently, a couple of months ago. And Pat Gelsinger was the guy that actually made sure that Intel was focusing again on technology, specifically manufacturing. And I think this post from Siliconfly on Twitter X really explains everything. A lot of people focus on the density on the node, beyond the name of the nanometers that you might recognize them from, TSMC 4 nanometer, 7 nanometer, or Intel 3 or Intel 4. I think it's more correct to look at the transistor density, so the amount of transistors that these manufacturing nodes are able to put into a square millimeters. I think in this case it's millions of transistors per square millimeter, right? And as we go from 2014 through 2025, this transistor density increases. These numbers are a little bit, unknown. All we know that they are in the right ballpark. For example, you would be sure that Intel 10 in 2018 at around 100 or so transistor density, million transistor density, should not be competitive with something like Intel 3, which probably is double that, right? Again, we don't know the exact numbers, difficult to know that. It's difficult depending on the specific chips. It's also, remember that it's very different just in a single chip as well. You might have different transistor densities in different area of the chip. It might be, the logic, it might be the, let's say, the cache or whatever that is. It's I'm not an expert in this area, but I know that it's very different. But again, these are rough ballpark numbers, and in any case, Intel 18A should be around 250, let's say 238, the latest rumors, to 300. TSMC 2 nanometer should be higher at 300. So the high density library of TSMC should be higher. But the problem for TSMC now is that TSMC 2 nanometer will be a late 26 product, whereas Intel 18A is a late 2025 product. Actually, the first product will be Panther Lake. We know that the server product Clearwater Forest, supposed to be this year, is now pushed back to next year. But remember, it's not due to the 18A being a problem for Clearwater Forest, the server CPU server big chip. The problem there is the packaging, right? So they have multiple small chips that they combine together, and the packaging of that chip, which makes this huge server CPU, That's where the problem right now is, and according to Intel, that is the reason why they pushed it back to next year, 2026, instead of this year. But Panther Lake doesn't need that kind of difficult of packaging technology compared to Clearwater Forest apparently, and it's gonna be late this year, second half. And remember that going back to that comment from Silicon Fly, you shouldn't compare, high density libraries, because when it comes to, what's matter for Intel right now, I think the data center is very important for them, actually trying to become more competitive compared to the main competition, AMD. And AMD is usually in the server area using the high performance node. So they focus on, higher like gigahertz, if you say so, like, maybe a little bit of a less density, but higher gigahertz, like higher speed essentially. The transistors turn on and off much faster in the high performance node compared to the high density nodes. In fact, if you see here, for example, you have like different, you have TSMC N3, right? The 3 nanometer process. Then they have N3B, N3E, N3P. I think there was N3A, if I recall correctly. I don't know. And each of those, B's or E's or P's are different kind of. Some of them are like cost effective. Some of them like TSMC N3P are focused on performance, and some of them are for high density. So it depends on what product you design. And right now, I think when looking at 18A, I think 18A is sure on paper has less density than TSMC's 2 nanometer for sure. But TSMC's 2 nanometer is not gonna be, it's 1 year behind 18A. And by the time 2 nanometer enters the fight, Intel should be ready with 18A, performance, 18AP, probably improved version of 18, obviously improved version of 18A. Still would be competitive. And remember that Intel already has gate all around, and you could argue also as well the backside power delivery, which I think is a really, really important thing. In fact, according to this other gentleman on Twitter, I cannot pronounce the name, Jenny Chan, maybe. He said he's a very important pointer that Pat Gelsinger, the previous CEO, the great CEO, last year had actually this quote here where he said that he believes that if everyone is looking at transistors of TSMC's N2 compared to their 18A, it's not clear which one is dramatically better than the other. So he's saying that these two are competitive to be very comparable. We have to see and wait and see who is the best. But one thing is for sure, when it comes to the backside power delivery, everyone is aware that Intel is first on this. And even TSMC's 2 nanometer won't have backside power delivery. So backside power delivery is probably a 2027 kind of news for TSMC. So no matter how you look and dice at this, I think 18A is for sure good, and at the very least, Intel is become like they're back in the game. If we see Panther Lake performing good, and if they're actually in high volume production very soon, in let's say 3 or 4 months from now, I think Intel is back in the game. Now is the question of, do they have enough money to survive in the coming, let's say, 18 to 24 months in order to build on this 18A success. Again, let's not, be 100% sure that 18A is a success, but it actually looks like it. No matter where you look at it, it looks like 18A looks to be good. In addition to all of that, we have, the geopolitical stuff with Trump being protective of US companies. And I think no matter how you look at this, Intel is a very, very, in my opinion, valuable company right now. I know with all the discussions about, as I started the video with Broadcom, TSMC, or even previously rumors of Apple trying to buy Intel, my hope is that they survive at this stage and essentially go from strength to strength based on the 18A process. I think 18A process is truly gonna do wonders for Intel if every rumor out there is correct. Most of them are correct. And all Intel needs to do is to do as Mojo Flying on Twitter says, let's get rid of this Frank Yeary. He's been there since 2009, if I recall. I think Frank Yeary has been there, since 2009. And he's been the chair, he was named the chair of the board in 2023, so 2 years from now. And I think a lot of people on this list here, if you have time, go through this list here. If you find this page on Intel's investor relation and then on their board committee, if you scroll through all these names, a lot of them are like from finance or life science, nothing to do with semiconductor industry. So I think this board of directors made a absolutely like gigantic mistake of firing Mr. Pat Gelsinger. He was the guy that actually put the 5 nodes in 4 years or whatever it was, and really focused the company on the technology, which is the actual semiconductor manufacturing. Even their designs comes in a second hand compared to the manufacturing side. And this company being, if you go to Yahoo Finance, I think especially remembering that Nvidia is, being traded for like trillions, to like 3.5 or maybe 2.5 to 3.5 trillion US dollar. You have Broadcom, above 1 trillion US dollar. You have TSMC as well in that same kind of, let's say, trillion or so US dollar market cap, right? And then you have Intel at something like, let's say, 100 billion or so, exactly at 102 billion, right? This is a company that's going to compete with TSMC, currently sitting over 1 trillion. And if this is, the first step, I would say, again, this is not investment advice, but with everything that I know now, I'm starting to become really, really positive on Intel, because when everyone is as the most negative on a company, if there's actual real value out there, I think you should, give this company a shot. Again, this is not investment advice, so do your own due diligence, but what do you guys think? Do you think this is a good company to invest in right now? Especially if you have a time frame of at least 2 to 5 years, which I think where if 18A is great, they continue to execute on 18AP and then 14A. I think for sure with also the geopolitics, being protective of US and Western companies compared to, let's say, based in Taiwan, TSMC, I think we might have a comeback story, the likes of, we have not seen since AMD was on the verge of bankruptcy back in 2015-16 timeframe. So I think, it's a really, really interesting time now. I think within 6 to 12 months, we'll have the proof about if Intel actually has managed to, actually do it. This past 4 or 5 years going sideways and a lot of times down in terms of stock price. But since Mr. Pat Gelsinger joined the company, they starting to focus on the manufacturing side, trying to improve their nodes, which is the fundamentals, the fundamental leg of the company. It kind of looks like we might be on the right path. I don't know. So that's gonna do it for today. Please like, subscribe, and engage in the comment section, and see you in the next one.